Alright, welcome back. Here's our next episode, and we are still in orbit here. We've got Jeb sort of chilling, flying around. Oh, look at that glorious sunset. Oh, that's just so majestic and beautiful. As the sun slowly sets on Kerbal from 95,000 meters up in the air. And now it's nighttime, and look, oh, all those stars. And is that the Death Star? No, that's not the Death Star. I wish it was. That would be sweet. That's the Mun. The Mun? The moon? They spell the moon weird here. But, yeah, that's the moon. That's where we're going to go in a few more videos. We'll eventually get out there. It's not too hard to get out to the moon. And you can't really see Minmus from here, I don't think. You might be able to. Where is it? Let's zoom out. Alright, so there's the moon. That's the first moon of Kerbal. And then you see this purple line out here. That's the next body orbiting Kerbal. It's a much smaller planet. Very low gravity. And really far out there. Look how far out that thing is. And the orbit is inclined a little bit, so it can be a little tricky to intercept with that one. But we'll talk about that when we're actually trying to get to the moon and working on intercepts. For right now, we need to understand what happens when we do things in orbit out here in space. Because that's great, I'm out in space, but now what? How do I get around? How do I maneuver? So if you want to change your orbit, the really important thing to realize is that, one, these prograde and retrograde vectors. So right now I am pointed in the direction that I am going. That's called my prograde vector. On the opposite side of the nav ball is the retrograde vector, and I can spin around and I can point at my retrograde vector. Now, how am I moving around in space? Because I don't have any engines burning, and I'm just kind of floating, so how is it able to just kind of move around like that? Well, spaceships and satellites have these things called reaction wheels, and they work off of electricity, and they basically interact with magnetic fields of planets that have magnetic fields, and they run a little current through an electromagnet, and that force from the planet's magnetic field interacting with the electromagnet in the ship causes it to spin around. And using that, you'll notice up in the top right, every time I make a little movement, I'm using up a little bit of electricity. I've got a battery in this ship, and if I use too much of it, then I can't move at all, and that's generally bad news for whoever's up there in the ship. Right? You got to treat electricity as a resource, just like fuel. You don't want to run out of it. So later on in future missions, we'll have batteries and solar panels. But for right now, be careful using up all your electricity. Okay? So those are the two basic directions, prograde and retrograde. There is also some other directions that we'll talk about later, perpendicular to my plane of travel, and perpendicular in the, I guess you'd call it the X direction, and perpendicular in the Z direction, and perpendicular in the Y direction. So those are all the basic angles you're going to have to learn. For right now, all we're going to concern ourselves with is the retrograde and prograde. So if you want to orbit higher, you point your ship prograde, the direction you're already going, and you turn on your engine, and that will accelerate you. You'll go faster, and it will change your orbit on the opposite side of your orbit where you're at now. So let's look at my orbit now, and now I'm going to turn on my engines pointing prograde. Turn on SAS to help stay pointed prograde, and what you're going to see now is that my orbit is going to start stretching out here towards, we'll call it the north side of the planet here, even though that's not really how directions work in space. So when I burn my engines, I'm stretching out my orbit, and now my apoapsis, my highest point, is moving out there on the opposite side of the planet from where I'm at now. So that's how you get into a higher orbit. You don't point out up, away from the planet. You can, but that's called circular or radial burns. It kind of shifts the orbits in different ways. But if you just want to go higher, the most efficient way is just to point forward and turn on your engine. If I want to slow down, I do the same thing, but in the opposite direction. I turn my ship retrograde, and let's get the ship around here to the retrograde vector, and I turn on my engines again. And now my apoapsis is shrinking back down to where it was. And I'm affecting my orbit now on the opposite side as well. So now it's eventually going to move my periapsis back to that opposite point on the planet, and I don't want to go too low because then I'll start entering the atmosphere, and that could be bad. All right. So I do eventually want to enter the atmosphere, but I got to make sure that I don't go too shallow or too steep, because either way can build up way too much heat on re-entry, and then I would, burn up and explode. So I don't want that to happen to Jeb. I want to keep him safe. So what I'm going to do is burn retrograde to come back down to the surface of Kerbal here. And I want to try to plan it out so that I land in the water, which is kind of tricky. If I burn here, I might be able to just land in the water on this side of the planet. But what you want to do is you want to get your periapsis down to about 35 to 40,000 meters. If you do that, then you'll be entering at a pretty good angle, and you won't build up too much heat, and you're not coming in too shallow, you're not coming in too steep. It's kind of the Goldilocks zone of re-entering, and you'll be able to safely return back down to the planet. So let's go ahead, let's just try it out. I want to land in the water, because if I don't land in the water, I'm gonna lose my Science Junior, and that would not be a good thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll just save. That's an idea. So if I do land over land, I can just not separate my engine, and I can use my engine to slow down with the parachute just before I touch down. So let's try that. All right, so pointing retrograde, gonna watch my periapsis, gonna start burning, gonna watch this get lower and lower and lower. Notice I didn't go full throttle this time, right about there, 35,000. Right, so yeah, don't go full throttle, because that number will change really quickly, and then it'll, get to a number you don't want it to be. If you mess up, slow down too much, and it gets down below 30,000, you can always turn right around and point prograde, and you can raise your periapsis again and get it to just that right spot. So let's turn around, let's make it a little bit higher. Let's go up to 37, right smack in the middle there. And so what's going to happen now is I'm going to start moving around the planet. I'm going to slowly start to enter the atmosphere. I'm going to hit that wall of air as I'm re-entering, and that's going to slow me down a lot. It's going to build up a lot of heat. I'm going to turn into a fireball. Hopefully I don't explode, and I'll be able to re-enter the atmosphere. So let's go ahead and point retrograde again, and we can do some time acceleration here and see what happens. Oh, you know what though? This engine's probably going to burn up in the atmosphere and explode. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Just hopefully land over water and don't lose our 25 science points, because that would be a bummer. Before we go, let's see if we can get another EVA report. Let's go ahead and have an EVA here. Let's make sure we take the data, store experiments. Let's do another EVA report. Oh, nice. We're over the highlands now. So that's another 8 points. Awesome. Hit the B key to get back on board. And now we time accelerate. Now notice, I was pointed retrograde, but because I'm spinning in orbit, I'm still pointed in the same direction in space that I was pointing before. Definitely want to keep that heat shield pointed in retrograde so that when I do re-enter the air, I don't burn up. All right, let's go time accelerate again. 90,000, 80,000, 70,000. Okay, starting to get close now to the atmosphere, starting to leave space. We'll hear the music cut off any second now. The music is the signal that you're in outer space. Once you lose the music, you're back into the atmosphere. All right, here we go. Music's gone. Re-entering. Notice my little atmosphere meter starting to decrease as I'm starting to run into more and more air molecules, air particles. Particle molecules. I call them polycules. All right, let's speed up some more. And once we get lower, we're going to start hitting a really big wall of air. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off SAS, and the natural kind of aerodynamics should keep me pointed. Retrograde. As I fly through the atmosphere and start generating all that heat, and the heat shield does its work to pass off all that heat out into the air around it, protecting the delicate scientific equipment inside, and of course Jeb. Time warp some more. 50,000. Here we go. All right, now the dangerous time. Let's make sure we're pointing retrograde up. Let's turn on SAS to help keep us pointing in the right direction. So an interesting fact about real spaceships and shuttles and all that good stuff, when you're re-entering the atmosphere like this, there's so much heat being built up that there's all kinds of radio interference that happens, and we actually lose contact with our astronauts during the re-entry process. So it's a real dangerous time. That's actually when we've lost a few shuttles, and some astronauts have died from shuttles exploding because something went wrong during the re-entry process. But every single time there's that really, really nervous window where we're not really sure if the astronauts are going to live or not. And it's kind of nerve-wracking for all the people sitting down there in Houston and mission control, just waiting for all that radio silence to end because they're hoping for the, pilots to come back on and say, hey, we're okay. Oh, I don't think I'm going to make it past this continent. I think I'm actually going to be splashing down. Yeah, I'm going to be landing in the desert, which is not going to be good for the old Science Junior. Didn't plan that descent really well. It's going to take a little bit of practice, I think, to figure out exactly where you want your periapsis to be at that 35,000 point, to figure out how far back from that are you actually going to touch down on the ground. So let's see. We had set it to be just past the continent here is where our periapsis originally was. And now it's looking like, I want to say how many degrees around the planet would that be? I don't know. We could definitely figure that out, though. There's definitely ways to measure that. All right, here we go. Still re-entering. It's a long process. Because like I said, we lose contact with the astronauts for this very reason, because it takes so long to re-enter and slow down. Let's speed it up a little bit. If you are generating too much heat, you'll see little meters pop up on your ship. And that's a warning sign that you're taking on a little too much heat, and you might want to, plan your re-entry a little better next time. Here we go. Fearless Jebediah Kerman. Gonna be landing in the desert, which will be cool because we can do some EVAs and some reports from out there and get some more science points. But I just know that this one parachute is not going to be enough to protect this Science Junior. We already learned that in previous missions. So, bummer on losing those 25 science points. Actually, oh, you know what I should have done? Yeah, out in space I should have done an EVA and collected the data and stored it in the pod, because then it wouldn't have mattered. I could have saved it. Good to know, right? So you've learned from my mistakes. Now you can plan appropriately. All right, so we're at 7,000 meters. We can right-click on our parachute, and it'll tell us whether or not we're safe to deploy here. So risky to deploy right now. Now it's safe. And deploy the parachute. Remember, do not time accelerate while the parachute is deployed. Or when it opens, I should say. You don't want to be time accelerating when the parachute is opening. You could do it right now, but because I don't actually know how far above the ground I am, I don't have like an altitude meter, right? This is 2,000 meters above sea level, and the parachute is set to open at a certain distance above the ground. And I don't really know where that instrument is to tell me how far I am above the ground. So, it's got to be careful. All right, 6.5 meters per second. Let's see if that kills the old Science Junior. Gonna lose all my points. Actually, should I risk it? I'll bet I could EVA right now. Climb down. Oh yeah, here we go. Get it, Jeb. Get those science points. Collect the data. Remove the data. Store the experiment. Get back on board. Yeah. Saved the science. And boom. Nope. Ah, totally unnecessary. It was fine this time. What gives? I don't get it. Maybe the ground is softer here or something. All right, well, anyways, let's go ahead and recover our vessel. Let's see what... Oh, I was so excited about saving the Science Junior that I forgot to do some more EVA reports out in the desert. No. Oh, well. All right, 50 science from that mission. I'm up to a total of 92 now. And there you go. Good luck getting your ship into orbit. Next time, we'll talk about flying by the moon. Oh, yeah. We're going to the moon, baby. All the way. See you next time.